Hey everyone, it is June 26, 2015. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to do some Apple talk about music, Taylor Swift, ad blockers, and Confederate flags. This is the iMore Show. Joining me this week, we have the FAQ'd amazing Serenity Caldwell. How are you, Ren?
I'm doing okay. I'm alive after that music FAQ. Thank you very much.
That was so. I looked at it when you said you were going to do it, and there were so many questions to which I could not find good answers, and you found them.
Yeah, it's all there. It's just kind of deeply hidden on Apple's website, and then on the Beats website, and a couple other places. It's just digging. That's what I do best, apparently, is digging up obscure facts on the internet and rounding them up into an FAQ.
Awesome. Well, it's a good talent. It's a good talent to have. Georgia is on vacation. Peter is traveling, I think, for a Mac user group. So Serenity and I thought we'd have some Apple talk.
Yeah, sit down, talk a little bit about what's going on this week.
I actually went and dug up my, for people who are listening and not watching, I have my Apple mug to do the Apple talk with.
I do not have an Apple mug. I feel like I have to fix that and also close this window so we don't get trucks.
Yeah, well, no, absolutely. We have to get you, you cannot drink Apple Kool-Aid if you have an Apple mug. We will make sure that we get that fixed.
Oh, yeah. No, what's Apple talk without a little bit of Apple mugs and obscure networking language?
All right, so, I mean, it was an interesting week. It started off on Sunday, which is usually downtime, but then some obscure personality, someone nobody ever heard of by the name of Taylor Swift, decided to write a Tumblr.
That girl. Yeah, Taylor Swift took to Tumblr to air her grievances with Apple's 3-month free policy. Say that 5 times fast. She was very irked that while Apple Music executives were saying, "Oh yeah, well we're gonna pay everybody a bigger percentage than any other streaming service pays artists to kind of balance that out." She really didn't like the math, and she doesn't like the precedent that it sets for not paying artists for free trials. And it's, you know what, Apple has enough money in the bank. Her objections are sound. And there are people who are like, oh, Taylor Swift makes millions. What is she doing complaining? But I mean, I think she is shrewd enough to know that she has a voice and she can speak out for the people who don't necessarily have billions of Tumblr followers.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's super interesting to me because earlier in the week, some, especially British independent labels and artists, came out to say that they weren't going to be participating in Apple Music because they weren't going to be compensated during the trial period. And one thing I wanted to clarify, because I found this, it just read like a meme. Taylor Swift used the word artists in her Tumblr post, and that's the most emotionally resonant word, so I understand why she used it. But really, it's a much more complicated thing than that, because there are artists involved, absolutely, but most of them have record labels. It was most of those record labels that made the agreements with Apple. Apple might have strong-armed them, we don't know, but those record labels made those deals, and those record labels are the ones who pay the artists and the producers and the various other people who have, like the writers, who have some sort of ownership over that music. So there's a lot of historical reasons why artists have been badly treated and badly done by, and a lot of that is at the hands of the record labels. But just to be clear, when people say in this context, Apple wasn't paying artists, Apple doesn't usually pay artists directly. It's really hard to get Apple to pay artists. Apple pays record labels pay artists. So the big deal here was getting Apple to just pay in general for that music, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Apple's original thought was, well, we'll just pay you more after the 3-month free trial ends so that you'll be fairly compensated. But it does set up a bit of a sticky precedent, especially for other streaming services who are like, oh, well, if Apple can do that, then we can do that. We don't even have to pay them this much. You know, I think that, Tumblr is an interesting medium for it. But I'm glad that Taylor Swift spoke out, and I'm glad with the compromise that Apple's reached with the record labels, where they're going to pay, I believe, 0.002 cents for play. 0.02. Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure. Well, 0.02 is a lot better than the industry standard. Spotify pays 0.0002 cents per free play, per ad-supported play, which seems astoundingly small to me. So if Apple is paying a little bit more than that, that would be really awesome.
Yeah, 0.2 cents for the use of the recordings.
0.2?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's much better. That's much better.
0.2 of a cent.
Yeah, 0.2 of a cent is a little, yeah. But regardless, paying record labels and paying folks for the use of their copyrighted content is a good thing. I'm glad that it's happening. I'm glad, also doubly glad, that Taylor Swift is like, yes, this is a deal that I can get behind, and I'm gonna put 1980. Yeah.
I think 80 something. It was a hell of a year.
1980.
84?
No.
82?
This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. 1989.
1989. All right.
I'm like, I listen to this album more often than usual, but all of this numerical shindiggery with cents and percentages has fried my brain. 1989. I'm really glad that it's coming to Apple Music. I own it, but I know a lot of people who either don't own it or who would like the ability to stream it. And I think it's really awesome. This is so far the first streaming service that will get 1989, although Swift has noted that it won't be the only service. She's not making an exclusive deal with Apple. She's just currently saying Apple is the only streaming service company at this point that I feel comfortable putting the album on there.
So to back up, just to sort of go through this. So this happened on Sunday. And I don't know anything about music. As the little that I know about Apple is exponentially more than I know about music. But so I just looked at it as someone trying to look at the deal and try to understand it. And it seemed weird that Apple is a company that cares deeply about music. Apple Music is something that company cares about to the extent that it is a menu item on Apple.com. It has been occupying vast amounts of time from Jimmy Iovine, Eddie Q, even Tim Cook. They're putting it on Android. They are doing things that you only do when you love a product more than you actually care about the business behind that product, because music is not going to move the needle for Apple. It's not going to make iPhone money. It's not going to make iPad money. It's something that they believe that is in, like, quote unquote, in Apple's DNA. So looking at it, it seemed like Apple would want to pay the artist. I'm sure there's bean counters who are like, don't pay the artist. Also, we're not giving away the server time for free. So charge people, but keep all the, I mean, just the calculations of that. So I sort of tried to think, what can you do? Let's say this letter comes out. What could Apple do? It seemed like the 3 months was essential to them. Because one of the first things was just don't do 3 months. Do like 1 week or 2 weeks.
They want 3 months. They want 3 months because that's how you get people on the service.
Yeah, you let them make playlists. You let them use it for so long that they forget that it's a trial, basically, which you know, you can debate the merits of that. But I think they thought that was important.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a very important selling point for them. You know, Apple Music is going to come to millions of devices on June 30th. And it's really important to Apple, I believe, that those people get to experience the full force of Apple Music and get hooked on it before they're asked to pay for it. It's, you know, hooked on phonics, hooked on many things.
So the other thing I thought is, yeah, just absolutely pay the artist, because I've been in a situation where I've gone to Hong Kong and I've seen photocopies of books that I've written on store shelves, and that's really a bad feeling. So I always think, like, right away, everyone needs to get paid for this stuff. But then, you know, 3 months is longer than the industry average. Most trials are nowhere near 3 months. So if Apple decides, we're going to use money from other businesses because we are profitable, the biggest, most successful company in many metrics in the world, we're going to subsidize this. Does that open them up to the kind of litigation that they've faced? The Justice Department is already looking into Apple Music. They've been sued over ebooks. Is Apple as a company nervous about spending? Would they rather have the 3 months trial and pay for it, but are they afraid that there will be litigation if they do?
Yeah, it's a tough question, and luckily Apple is in a good position financially where they can say, you know what, why don't we just sidestep this? Why don't we? And I honestly, I don't think that Apple's bean counters and Apple's financial gurus were like, don't pay the artists, it'll be great. I legitimately think that Apple made a decision saying, oh, our people have advised us that paying more throughout the rest of the contract will make up for the 3 month trial. That's a fair compromise. I don't think they were like, yes, let's not pay the evil artists. You know, Apple is a good company at heart. Like, they take percentages for the things that they sell, but they're also not overly greedy.
Yeah, I mean, like Apple traditionally, because traditionally, like an Eddie Q sort of a product. I don't know this product. Like, I don't know Beats very well. I don't know if Beats has a more recording industry sort of flavor to it, and this might be a more recording industry type deal. I can't speak to that. I don't know anything about it, but just from an Apple point of view, it doesn't make sense.
No, no, it doesn't.
The other thing I thought they could do is you could back weight stuff, so you pay attention to what people are listening to when it's free, and then when they do convert, you provide bonuses to the tracks they listen to that help them convert. And there were all sorts of other things that they could do to get around this, but they actually chose the simplest solution, which was just to pay artists. And there was no conspiracy theory. I know some people immediately were like, Apple planned this all along. This was a big co-promotion by Taylor Swift, and then no, this was a nightmarish Sunday for everybody involved.
Yeah, let me give you a hint. When you plan marketing stunts, they don't start on Sundays. Because you know what people are doing on Sundays? They're sleeping or sitting out at a pond or going to church. Like they're not reading Taylor Swift's Tumblr unless they're 18-year-olds.
And Eddie Q. Yeah, the senior vice president of Apple, Ren, he starts tweeting at 6 o'clock Pacific on a Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, I can see Eddie sitting in his Hawaiian shirts and sipping, or like his bright pink shirt and sipping a Mai Tai, and just like scrolling through his Twitter feed and then seeing Taylor Swift like, okay, I can't wait for PR.
And then he started doing the rounds. He was on BuzzFeed. He was on Recode. He was on a couple other places. This was a major, like, and this just doesn't happen. I can't recall this ever happening. And AntennaGate didn't happen like this. That was like a couple of weeks of us not hearing. Well, getting a couple snide Steve emails, but not hearing anything. This was for one of the world's largest companies to pivot this quickly. Some people suggested that maybe this was a huge ongoing debate within the company and this tipped it in the other direction. Other people that the launch was a week away and that Apple simply couldn't wait. Maybe a confluence of those things.
Yeah, I definitely believe that it was, again, I believe it was probably a debate within the company where some people are like, people are not going to go to this and look at all these indie labels and this is concerning to us. I think this is very much Eddie Q's baby and Ian Rogers' baby, and like they don't, launching a new streaming music service when there are already streaming music services in the area, that's tough. That is a difficult ramp to launch yourself off of. But Apple can do it. Apple has the experience and the history with music. We actually have a great piece up on Friday by Jason Snell about Apple's history with music and why that makes them a good sort of fit for the streaming music industry. But still, it's a tough sell to customers. And the last thing they want are people up in arms, in an Uber-like tiff because Apple isn't paying artists. I don't think that that's what they wanted at all.
So was this a good outcome at the end? Because it did. There's two arguments we made here. Some analysts said that this was a huge bonanza for Apple Music because now a lot more people have heard about it and will be trying it. But on the flip side, hundreds of millions of people are going to have it show up on their devices on Tuesday anyway. Was this a small loss for Apple? It was a huge win for Taylor Swift, obviously.
Yeah, I actually don't think it was a loss for Apple at all. Obviously, they're paying more money to artists. But I actually think that's a good thing because now they got a bunch of artists that they weren't going to have.
Yeah.
So that's a win for them. The fact that they get to currently be the only streaming service that supports 1989, that's a big win for them. Yeah. And they get more, they get the buzz of being the ones who get stuff done, right? Where it's like, someone has an issue, it's a major issue, we're taking it seriously, we're getting it done, we're fixing it in 48 hours. Like that's the kind of pivoting that you don't, as you were saying, you don't see from a major multi-million-dollar corporation. And the fact that Apple can still work like that, can still be startup-like in its ability to pivot, that's really impressive. And it's something that artists also and the recording industry in general can stand up and take notice on. It's like, Apple, as always, has been the one fighting to make music sustainable and listenable online. Apple basically came in and saved the recording industry from Napster, which is a vast generalization, and there were lots more subtle things happening under the hood. But on the whole, the recording industry does have a certain amount of respect for the company, as for all of their Ping-like blunders. They know. They know at their core what's important to artists.
Yeah, and I think it's really telling that everyone makes mistakes. Every company makes mistakes. I make tons of mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It's how you react to those mistakes that's usually more telling about you as a person or as a business. And again, this was a senior vice president of Apple responding on Twitter senior vice president of iTunes responding on Twitter of all things late on a Sunday night. And that I think is incredibly revealing about Apple's character as a company, about what's important to them, and about their ability to respond when they have to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those gestures that just shows what kind of company Apple is.
All right, so beyond the Taylor Swifts and the Eddie Qs, how is music looking to you? How is it shaping up? You just answered a ton of questions. Is there anything that stood out to you?
I did. So there's this iTunes Match Apple Music confusion, which is I think the biggest question that I've been asked about so far, which is that Apple Music's documentation on Apple's website clearly talks about we're going to upload your iTunes library, including any songs that we can't match to our catalog, so you can have everything in streaming. And a bunch of people are like, isn't that what iTunes Match does? And then there was well, is iTunes Match going to die? No, iTunes Match is separate but complementary. So here's the deal, or at least here's what I've been able to figure out. And this is without, of course, using the app. So we will answer your iTunes Match questions for sure on Tuesday. But for now, for what I can tell, Apple Music will essentially replicate iTunes Match as part of an Apple Music subscription. So if you are subscribed to the $10 a month or $15 a month if you have the family plan, you get all of your stuff synced and uploaded. Doesn't seem to be a song limit, although I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same 25,000 song limit that iTunes Match does have. We haven't seen that fine print yet, but TBD. Again, we'll find out on Tuesday. On the iTunes Match side, why does iTunes Match still exist if Apple Music can do this? Well, they're going to see some people that don't want the streaming aspect, right? They don't want to pay $10 a month for streaming because they're not interested in that. They just want to stream their content. They want the content that they have owned and they have ripped and they have uploaded to iTunes to be available on all of their devices. And for that, you're looking at, $120 a year versus $25 a year. So if the only thing that you want to do is listen to ad-free iTunes radio, now Apple Music radio stations, and you want to upload your library to the cloud, but you don't want access to the streaming music service, then it sounds like you stay on iTunes Match and everything's hunky-dory. If you do want access to the streaming music as well as all of that stuff, it sounds like you cancel your iTunes Match account and just go on Apple Music. As I said, that is based entirely off of what Apple has publicly available. I don't want anybody canceling their subscription until Tuesday and we find out for sure. But it sounds like that is the path that iTunes Match users who want to switch to Apple Music will take, is that they'll cancel their Match subscription and they'll sign up for Apple Music. And the people who want to keep their iTunes Match, everything gets uploaded so that it can be streamed, your collection can be streamed on your devices, you can keep it. And keep on going and keep on rocking it out. And you don't have to pay $120 a year for the same service.
Yeah, and I think that's really, because of the way it is on the page, it is confusing with iTunes Match and with iTunes radio references. But I think you explain it really, really well. Basically, if you want iTunes, if you pay for Apple Music, you get everything. If you don't want the music locker stuff, you can just use the free radio stuff. If you don't want the radio stuff, you can just do the $25 iTunes Match stuff. So you basically get you get all the components, and you can sort of pick the whole enchilada or just the toppings that you desire. Yeah,
exactly. You can mix and match, which is really, is nice of Apple. I am curious if Apple Music is going to have the same 25,000 song limit that iTunes Match did, because if it doesn't, that opens up a whole new world for people who have been stymied by the 25,000 song limit. And I know quite a few who are avid music lovers. And the fact that, the streaming service will hopefully compensate for some of that. They do have some more classical music, I've heard, which is very exciting to some of my friends who love to listen to classical music.
All right, so this is supposed to land June 30th with iOS 8.4. Apple said a lot of countries. Some people have been vexed because they'll go to like /CA or /UK and it'll say coming soon with not an exact date. But I believe Apple said a lot of countries. So there's odds that the usual suspects at least will be there.
They said over 100 countries. There's someone on Cult of Mac did a quick search, and they're basically assuming that every country that has a music tab where you can read about music and Beats Music and all of that is probably getting Apple Music. Now, whether or not you'll get it on June 30th, that's another question. I would like to assume so, especially considering that Beats One is supposed to be a global radio station, and it can't really be a global radio station without covering the globe.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I will also be interested to see how this, China's censorship laws and whether or not we'll actually see this in China, at least at first, will be really interesting to me. But the Chinese, Asian, the Asian population loves music just as much as North America or Europe. So here's hoping.
All right, so yeah, so I guess come back on Tuesday for everything and anything that we can possibly give you in regards to music. And in the meantime, I'm going to take a quick break and tell you about Red Hat. Red Hat is tried, tested, and trusted. And so Red Hat, if you're not familiar with it, Red Hat is a type of Linux. It's more than Linux, actually. Linux by itself is an operating system. It's open source software. We in the Mac community don't always understand open source software, but we use tons of it. FreeBSD is what OS X is based on. We have the Mac kernel, which is open source. We have WebKit, which forms the basis of Safari and so much else of the technology that we use every day. That's also open source. And it's all very valuable stuff, but it's not always easy to deal with. And that's what Red Hat wants to fix. So open source software, they make it supported, especially at the high levels of enterprise computing. So you could roll it on your own if you want to, but in an enterprise environment, it really behooves you to have a company there that knows what they're doing, that can help you do it, and then make sure that your implementation does exactly what you need it to do. So that's where Red Hat Enterprise Linux comes in. Red Hat offers storage solutions, cloud computing, everything you need for application development, all open source and all enterprise grade. The stats are eye-opening. Red Hat runs in every executive department of the US federal government, every airline, telecom giant, and healthcare company in the Fortune 500, the New York Stock Exchange, and every commercial bank in the Fortune 500. In fact, more than 90% of all companies in the Fortune 500 use Red Hat for everything from critical to the routine. The only thing that's really not surprising is how many people know about the technology but don't know about Red Hat's part in it. It's almost like Red Hat kind of snuck in, got really comfortable, and quietly transformed the technology business without making a fuss. So if you are working in enterprise, if you are interested in open source software, if you don't want to pay out the gobs of money you may be paying out for proprietary software that never quite works the way you want it to, and you have no control over any stage of the product, check out Red Hat. Sometimes the most disruptive technology is the stuff that no one notices at first. To find out more about Red Hat and how they're redefining enterprise technology, visit redhat.com. Red Hat. Build on it, run with it, count on it. Thank you so much, Red Hat, for supporting us. Ren.
Yes.
So as a Canadian, I have to admit that I don't feel totally confident talking about issues like the Confederate flag, but I can just relate factually what's happened, and that is a bunch of retailers, including Amazon, including Walmart, decided that it was no longer acceptable to sell merchandise or content that had the Confederate flag, symbols of the Confederate flag, depictions of it in their products. Apple has followed suit. They removed a large amount of content from the App Store that contained depictions of the Confederate flag, including a lot of games and including a lot of historical content. They've since said that some of that might be coming back, especially if it is historical or educational in nature, but that in general, anything that uses the Confederate flag in a way that might be offensive or demeaning to a huge amount of humanity will just no longer be welcome in the App Store.
Yeah, and I am of two minds on this. On one hand, on a human level, I think this is a great move from Apple. And there's been a lot of divisiveness over the Confederate flag in the U.S. over the last week or so, in part because of the South Carolina shooting. But overall, it's one of those things where I'm really grateful that they're taking a stand and being like, hey, this is this is not used in a way that will, that it's doing anything but encouraging racism and encouraging gamers to play games about racism. But there are educational uses, and Apple seems to be committed to finding a way to work with those apps. I wish that Apple, part of me wishes that Apple would crack down more, would take this same kind of stance on other games that are clearly attacking areas of humanity that it's not very cool, or apps that are that are derogatory or demeaning. The App Store has always been curated for the people who are like, what about my freedoms? The App Store has always been curated and locked down. Apple, you know, we've seen this time and time and time again from Apple. Apple locks down stuff they don't like. They kick out Karma Sutra apps, you know, and if you don't like it, then don't play. That's been their policy from the beginning. They don't want porn on the App Store. If you don't like it, don't play.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that immediately when this happens, everyone cries censorship. But I think it's just really important to reiterate that this is not censorship. This is editorial control, editorial discretion. Just like Serenity and I can't make a pilot and force NBC to air it. We can't write a diatribe and force the New York Times to publish it. You only have the power to publish to platforms you control. This is editorial discretion. Now, that doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It can still be wrong editorial discretion. It's just not the government coming in and telling Apple that they can no longer have these apps in store. Apple is making that decision themselves. And yes, it affects developers, but it's the same as the shelves in Walmart. The people making the stuff are subject to what a Walmart is willing to carry on their shelves. It's no government coming in and saying Walmart has to do this. Now, the one criticism I think is most interesting, and a couple of people raised this, is that Apple tends to, they don't take a scalpel to this stuff. They don't stop and say, we're going to spend a week carefully surveying it and then strategically remove apps.
Well, they flamethrow it. They're like,
yeah, or an axe, whatever. They come in, they remove everything. It's like one of Georgia's Zen and Tech episodes about how to declutter. You take everything out, you throw everything out, then only the things you really want do you put back in. And it's a very sound organizational principle. It leads to very high levels of curation, but it can be incredibly stressful, quasi-devastating for people who are genuinely not bad doers who get caught in it.
Yeah, you know, so I have been advocating this for a while, and I really think that, you know, there are certain subjects that are going to be touchy. Like Apple recently, there was a thing about Apple not allowing violent screenshots in the App Store. I wish Apple had a specific review team that would look at either mature themed apps or apps that might have the ability to cause some distress. And I really wish there was a specific team designed, again, like you said, to scalpel through submissions. And unfortunately, just the App Store gets so many submissions every day, and it's becoming harder and harder for there to have a homegrown, you know, team of humans to look through this stuff. But it's so important, especially if it is going to be editorially restricted and editorially curated. You need humans looking at this stuff. You need humans making the decisions and not just being like, oh, is there a Confederate flag somewhere in your app? It's out. Wait, what do you mean that this was a Civil War? You know, what is this Ken Burns Civil War documentary? You know, sorry, you're out.
Yeah, and to that point, there was some talk about like why Apple didn't remove, for example, Civil War documentaries from iTunes. And they were maybe treating games as lesser class content, but I think the opposite is actually true. Games and apps are considered higher level content, where a documentary is something you watch. It's a presentation of facts. A lot of these games you could actually play as the Confederacy, which in and of itself is offensive to a large group of people. There was incidents before where Apple, for example, pulled games that they thought were demeaning to Germans or to other nationalities. I don't think they've ever maybe you recall, I don't think they've ever done anything to sort of clean out the misogynistic or anti-women, which is another issue all in of itself. So there's obviously work to be done with this, and it's not easy work. This is going to be messy, complicated, heartbreaking, and life-affirming work. But I think exactly to your point, Ren, it's got to be humans that do it.
Yeah, and it's, for me, the frustration is, if you're going to do this, you need to not just do it with the flavor of the week. You need to actually sit down and say, all right, what are the contentious categories? What do we need to be doing better? What are we failing at right now as editorial reviewers? Let's take that. Let's take a step back. Let's make a list, and then let's go through category by category. Right now, it really feels to me that Apple is just doing flavor of the week, where they say, oh, Confederate flags. No one wants to see Confederate flags. Let's get rid of Confederate flags. Oh, Karma Sutra apps. No, that's good. That's gone. Like, it's just so frustrating to me. It honestly feels half-assed. And that's frustrating because I think their heart is in the right place. I think that in general, it's not a terrible thing from an editorially restricted company. It's the same thing where people were up in arms about Walmart removing Confederate stuff, imagery from their shelves. Well, you know what? Walmart's a private business. They're allowed to do that. Apple's a private business. They're allowed to do that. Are we treating the symptom and not the problem? Probably.
Yeah, and as someone, just as an observer, like it's always, yeah, the no porn thing absolutely understood and agreed with, but you have the violence equivalent of porn
Mhm.
still in the store. Is that worse, better for humanity? Really? I mean, I live in Quebec, and French TV has nudity on after 9 o'clock. And you can say what you want about our society, but is having people ripped to shreds by bullets, that's fine on every channel in every country. We seem to distinguish. We seem to hold violence to a much lower standard than we hold sexuality. And like you said, there's so many complicated issues here, and it doesn't look like it's planned, and that someone is looking at this bigger picture. It does look like this has become an issue, and for all these companies, that it took till now to remove Confederate flags in itself is not ideal. I mean, like that waiting on that, it's just wrong.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. They said I see where people are frustrated. Like I see where app developers are frustrated, especially because it comes out of the blue. I see where people are frustrated. I personally, as I said, it feels like too much and not enough at the same time. Where this is a fine gesture by Apple, but ultimately it's not going to stop institutional racism in the country. Like taking away a couple of games where you can play Civil War soldiers and shoot at black people is that better for the App Store? Probably. Is it really going to help? I don't know.
I know we're going to get, because we had a post up on this, and we had I love our readers dearly, but everyone has to understand that our own point of view is forever limited. We can't see beyond ourselves, and there are going to be times where we feel like we are under attack. I live in a province that had a quiet revolution that had, they started taking off English signs and putting up French signs. And I came from South Africa, a country where they had apartheid. And one of the greatest acts I ever saw was Nelson Mandela, because he held a country together that had no business staying together. And he did that through love and kindness and humanity. And almost everyone else where that sort of thing has happened, they became punitive and angry and defensive, and it led to chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can remember a time in your life where you felt discriminated against, it could be because you were the last one picked. It could be something totally silly, last one picked at a basketball game, or you didn't get asked out by somebody you wanted to and somebody else did. There's a time when you felt unchosen or unloved or worse than or less than. And if you could think about that at the scale of an entire people or culture or nation or gender, then you can start to develop some sort of empathy and sympathy and understanding of what people go through every day. And then I think it changes everything. You might not like martial arts stereotypes in movies or mob stereotypes in movies or whatever it is, a depiction that makes you feel stereotype. They exist for everybody, and just write those large. And then however you might feel about a Confederate flag being part of your culture, or a swastika or a hood or whatever symbol it might be, that pales to insignificance compared to its impact on other people. And so good on the App Store for doing this. I wish they would do, like you said, I wish that this would be something deeply embedded in the culture of all retailers and not just something we respond to. Whoops, sorry, ranty. All right, so I think we lost Ren for a minute. We are going to push on. I'm going to tell you about something else that I need to tell you about, and that is Midroll. And they are actually the ones who handle all these sponsorships for us here on iMore. And I'm just going to read this out. I'm assuming Lex Friedman wrote this with his own delicate hands, so I don't want to by any means alter a word of it. You know that we have great advertisers support the show and keep it free for you. One of the reasons why advertisers love the iMore show is that they know we have amazing fans. Right now we have a survey that I'd like you to take to help us learn more about you, our audience. Just go to podsurvey.com/iMore. The survey will take only 5 minutes. We're going to ask you some questions about yourself and what you like to buy, but it's completely anonymous. Your answers help us find advertisers that are well matched to you, your interests, and the show. When you're finished, you can enter a monthly drawing to win a $100 Amazon gift card. So just to basically spell this out, they want to make sure that when I read ads, they're ads that are things that you'll actually like and enjoy. So instead of thinking of these ad reads as interruptions in your enjoyment of the otherwise aptly discussion, you think of them as cool new products and services that you can discover and enjoy and that you're actually happy about. So once again, that's podsurvey.com/iMore. And Lex says, please spell out the URL. So I'll do that. podsurvey, sorry, .com/IMORE. Thanks for helping us find the best advertisers so that we can keep the show free. So while I was talking to you, Serenity lost her internet connection. So Georgia is on vacation, Peter is traveling, and now Serenity is offline. We are going to plow on and hope that she rejoins us. So sort of the last thing I wanted to talk about today, or we wanted to talk about today, was ad blockers. Back at WWDC, part of what they unveiled as new to Safari and new to WebKit is the idea of content blockers. So what content blockers are plugins that will go on iOS and basically let you selectively, or let the developers selectively remove content. It can be absolutely anything. Anything that they can identify as a discrete part of a web page, they could remove. For example, it could be the logo on a web page. It could be the footer. It could be every image on a web page. Could be anything that has a header tag on it, like an H1 or an H2. The most obvious and certainly the most popular use of this is going to be as ad blockers. And by that, it means they're going to try to determine the parts of a page that contain advertising and then remove those so the page renders without it. So for example, if you go to a site like iMore right now, you'll see there's a bunch of ads inserted in between all the text. An ad blocker will make that disappear. They'll load the rest of the page and prevent that from loading. Now, historically on desktops, ad blockers have been kind of horrible because they've been really code heavy. They've sometimes injected bad stuff all their own, and it's been a free-for-all. And there are some really good ones, of course, but there are also some really bad ones. It's kind of hard to tell, and the impact that they had on performance might not make much difference when you've pulled all the ads out. That's completely different for what's happening on iOS. Apple is enforcing incredibly high performance standards for these things so that they can pull stuff out of the page, make it render faster, but they can't put a bunch of junk in to slow it down again or to do things that we don't want them doing. So it looks like a really good system, and developers can make these plugins, offer them up on the App Store. You'll be able to install them into Safari and into the Safari View Controller, which can be embedded in all sorts of other apps. So theoretically, you'll be able to suppress any content that these things allow you to suppress. Again, primarily it's going to be ads on any website you visit in Safari. I don't know if it'll be granular, like you'll be able to choose which websites to suppress ads on, which ones you don't. If there'll be a toggle to invoke it, if it'll be an all or nothing thing. There'll probably be a ton of different apps that let you have all sorts of different options to do this with. In general, as someone I don't sell ads, but I work for a company that does sell ads. And those ads pay not just for me, but for all of our writers, for all of our designers, for all of our developers. They are how we can afford to keep writing and producing websites. It is really not cheap to make a website like iMore, like Android Central, like Windows Central, like Crackberry. You can see by how many of those have folded over the last few years or been bought out, how really difficult it is to survive. And you can say that, there are other business models to explore, and there absolutely are. And a lot of people have success in those business models, but they're primarily not large companies at this point. They're primarily individuals who have little or no overhead. And maybe that's the way this is all going to end up. Maybe everyone's going to end up having to be their own person and not have sites like iMore or like the big magazine sites or the big network sites. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that'll be better. So all we have to do is see. One thing I'm fairly certain about is that ads aren't going away. The simple reason for that is the sites have to be supported. Otherwise, they will shut down and we will not have anything to read. And I want stuff to read. And also, ad companies want your attention, and they are willing to pay so much more for it. I mean, people have often said, why can't we just subscribe? We can give you a few dollars, and then we won't get ads. The reason is that it's the few dollars, and I'm sad to say this, they just aren't enough. Ad companies pay so much money that it is way more than any individual can afford to pay for the content. And that's if they're willing to pay. Most people simply aren't willing to pay for content anymore. That goes back to the music discussion. Because one of the things we didn't mention is, as much as people wanted Apple to pay the artists, we're the ones listening to the music. We should be paying the artists. Most of us don't want to. We'd much rather Apple pay them or some fictitious entity pay them, because we don't want to. We don't want to pay for content anymore. We want everything for free. And the end result of that is nobody will make anything anymore. No one can afford to make anything anymore. Or people will make stuff that is worth what we're paying for it, which is nothing. So bringing that back to blogs, what'll probably happen, in my guess, is that advertising will go native. Instead of loading a lot of the JavaScript that they load now, they'll just be standard images, or they'll be native ads where the ads are presented in the same context as the content. Native ads has gotten a really bad name because some people have used it really badly, but native ads are everywhere. If Howard Stern reads a product placement, during his radio show. That's a native ad. I just read one for Red Hat Linux. That's a native ad. Television shows that have commercials, they're showing you videos inside other videos. That's a native ad. So as much as people complain about ads on websites and then stop and do a podcast sponsorship read, which is the ultimate in sort of intercept ads, they're really all the same thing. The question is mainly, how can we deliver these in the best possible way? Because if we deliver them really well, you won't want to block them. And if you do, you might be blocking content. And that's not meant to be punitive. That's just meant to show that it's part and parcel of the entire experience. And if you don't like that, you just won't read it. And then you'll go somewhere else. And the sites that you like will do better, and the sites that you don't will do worse. And that's, nature's way. But my guess is that it will go towards more native delivery. So as content blockers increase, websites will adapt. And that's actually probably a good thing, because right now, and don't tell the advertiser I said this, but I can't believe the sorry state of advertising, especially on mobile. We've had Retina displays for years, and a lot of ads aren't Retina. There's tremendous amounts of money flowing in this business, and ads are amongst the worst designed, worst conceived, worst conceptualized, worst delivered experiences available. And it seems to me like, as a point of pride, they would want to make amazing ads that people would love to click and find out more about. Apple tried this with iAd. It didn't succeed, so maybe I'm a moron, and that's just not the way that things work. But if there's going to be an ad there, I would much rather it be a fantastic ad, a gorgeous ad, an ad that I just can't help but to tap. And hopefully this moves in that direction. And it moves away from the sort of heavy JavaScript tracker-laden performance gargling. Again, don't tell my bosses I'm saying this, but performance that we've been suffering through with these sloppy, really inconsiderate ads. And I think that'll be to everyone's benefit, including the ad companies, who maybe there are a lot of really talented, really awesome people in these companies who have been fighting every day to make better experiences, and they were just told it's not worth it. Nobody cares. Now they'll have absolute proof that people absolutely care about this, and they'll be able to get their agendas through and make better ad experiences for all of us. Because at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for this stuff. If we're not paying, it's going to be someone else. If we're not paying with money, we're going to be paying with attention or with data or with something. And that's the choice we make. It's the choice we make when we use Gmail and they show us ads in the middle of our email, or when we go to Google search and there's ads on the side of the search thing. That's us paying with our attention and with our data. And if we're not paying with money, that's the only possibility available to us. So all this to say that there was an article that went up that basically showed iMore as an example of content before the blocker and content after the blocker, and what the difference in looks were, and what the difference in performance was. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes because it really is going to affect almost every website that's seen on iOS, which is still a huge portion of mobile web activity. And it's going to be something that every site from iMore to, CNN, USA Today, biggest websites in the world. And it's going to be up to every individual to decide first if they're going to use ad blockers or not, because it does directly affect the revenue of the site you're blocking. And it may cause that site to go away, which is not a threat, but it is a reality. And if people do start using them, how the sites are going to adapt and how they're going to find ways to work around the ad blockers, which again isn't a threat, but an inevitability, because those sites want to keep existing and they will fight to survive. So to wrap this all up, I'll just say once again, it is super, super interesting technology. And I'm super happy that Apple is pushing performance. I think Apple is a company who doesn't make their money off online advertising. They are sort of not incentivized to ignore this technology, and they can force websites the way they're sort of forcing better security with app transport security. They're sort of forcing better performance by allowing people to block out those things which have historically not provided good value, at least not directly provided good experience for the reader, but have really sort of janked up the experience. So I hope it didn't get me fired. Please don't fire me. But I think it's a super interesting talk. And Serenity was not able to get back online, so super sad. Peter and Georgia should be back with us, if not next week, then soon thereafter. I haven't checked their schedules yet, but I will absolutely be here. I believe Serenity will absolutely be here. And as many people as we can will absolutely be here. So if they were here, they would tell you that you can find Georgia on Twitter at Georgia_DAO. You can find Peter on the socials at Flarg, Flargh. He is super fussy about that age. And you can find Settrn at SETTRN. That's Serenity, Settrn, on Twitter, Instagram, and the other social things. And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. The video version of this show is available on YouTube, youtube.com/iMoreVideo. And the audio version is available on iTunes. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. Please do leave a review. It means a lot to us because we love hearing from you, but it also helps encourage the people who are in charge of featuring shows to feature this show because they think that other people are enjoying it. We are doing a bit of a format change. So last week we did our first episode of Select All, which we pick our favorite accessories and apps and sort of give them mini reviews for you. This was an Apple Talk episode where we sort of focus on a few big issues and try to really get into the discussion about them. We're going to have a Q&A episode next week where we sort of answer all the questions that you've been sending us over the last few weeks. And I have a new QA column that runs on Sunday on iMore. You can check that out as well. And then we should be having some more guest episodes too, because you guys reminded us that you love it when we have guests on. We haven't had any on for a while. So we're going to be rectifying that. And just in general, we're going to be mixing it up to keep the show more interesting, more relevant, and more fun for everybody. More fun for us too. So thanks everyone for joining us on behalf of myself and Serenity and all those in absentia. We will talk to you next time. Have a great week.